Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Always a pleasure.
Today, we're looking at this essay that's making the rounds,
Yeah,
and it's kind of laying out this vision for Europe's future, in a world where AI is just like everywhere.
right.
And get this, the essay is arguing that Europe's biggest advantage might actually be all of its cultural stuff, like
Interesting.
all its history and, all those traditions.
I mean, it makes sense in a way.
Yeah.
Like, that's what Europe is known for, right?
Totally. And the essay pulls from all these different sources.
Hmm.
Like there was this ex post from Alessandro Palumbo that kind of kicked off this whole discussion.
Uh-huh.
And then we've got some reports from McKinsey, NATO, even the EU.
Wow.
And then, believe it or not, even some news articles about tourism in Venice.
Venice, huh?
Yeah, so it's like this big mix of stuff.
Well, I'm always fascinated by how Europe seems to be kind of struggling right now, you know?
Right.
But then the essay is like, hey, but they've got all this potential.
Yeah.
Like, it acknowledges that Europe's got a lot of bureaucracy holding it back.
Uh-huh.
And innovation is kind of slow, especially compared to, like, Silicon Valley.
Yeah, and then there's that whole thing about depending on the U.S. for defense.
Right, which could be a problem.
Especially if like someone who isn't so friendly towards NATO gets back in power.
Exactly.
But, it's not like Europe isn't trying to catch up.
Yeah.
Like, remember that Draghi report?
Oh, yeah.
They were talking about investing something like 800 billion euros just to boost innovation.
Right, a huge amount.
But it seems like it's stuck in,
Bureaucracy, classic Europe.
But here's the thing that the essay points out. Europe has over 500 UNESCO World Heritage Sites.
Wow, that's a lot.
And they bring in millions of tourists. I mean, think about it. The U.S. only has 25 of those sites.
That's a huge difference.
It is, and that's where Alessandro Palumbo's ex post comes in.
Okay.
He thinks that as AI starts to solve our productivity problems,
Uh-huh.
the things that are really going to become valuable are those authentic human experiences.
Makes sense.
And guess what? Europe is like overflowing with them.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. In a world where AI can basically automate everything,
Yeah.
those unique experiences, the ones you can't just replicate with AI, those are going to become really special.
Right. So it's like connecting with history with different cultures.
Yeah, like really feeling a sense of place.
Exactly. Those are all things AI can't really give you.
Nope.
And McKinsey's predicting that something like 60% of jobs to be automated by 2035.
Wow, 60%?
Right.
That's
No, it's a
a
lot.
huge chunk of jobs.
So if we're all going to have all this extra free time, it would make sense to spend it, experiencing something real and meaningful.
For sure.
And the essay actually says that by 2035, Europe could be investing 100 billion euros every year just to preserve its heritage.
That's a serious commitment.
I know. Imagine the possibilities.
Yeah.
Restoring ancient ruins, museums with cutting-edge tech that actually enhances the human experience instead of replacing it.
It's like taking the best of both worlds, right?
Totally.
And remember Palumbo's idea of experiential micro-resorts?
Oh,
He
yeah.
was talking about people staying in like a historic castle in Normandy
Oh, wow.
or a traditional finca in Spain, like really immersing themselves in the culture.
I love that idea. It's like a pushback against all the digital stuff we're bombarded with all the time.
Right.
People are craving something real, something tangible, and Europe is like perfectly set up to offer that.
It's true.
But how does that actually work in terms of economics? I mean, can Europe really turn its cultural heritage into like a money-making machine?
Well, the essay suggests that tourism, which is already huge for Europe, could become even bigger.
Okay.
They're predicting a potential 50% increase in tourism to France alone.
Wow.
That's like 75 million visitors every year.
That's a lot of croissants and Eiffel Tower selfies.
It is, but seriously, think about the economic impact of that many people coming to Europe.
Yeah, okay, that's impressive, but wouldn't all those tourists kind of ruin the things that make Europe special in the first place?
That's a good point.
Like overcrowding, commercialization, people complaining about long lines for the Mona Lisa. How do you avoid all that?
Well, the essay talks about that, especially with the example of Venice.
Oh, Venice.
Right? They even suggest some pretty radical solutions,
Like what?
like limiting daily visitors to just 20,000.
Seriously?
Yeah, and maybe even using AI-powered systems to manage the flow of people.
Whoa. AI as a bouncer for one of the most famous cities in the world.
It's a pretty wild idea.
It is, but I guess if you're trying to protect something that precious, you got to consider all your options.
Right.
But okay, let's move on to another big point. How does Europe actually close that innovation gap they're facing?
Right.
Castles and cathedrals are great, but they need to be competitive in the tech world too.
Absolutely, the essay argues for a more decentralized approach to innovation.
Okay.
Like imagine countries like the Netherlands and Sweden creating their own versions of Silicon Valley,
Interesting.
fostering startup ecosystems that can compete with the big guys.
So it's about playing to their strengths, focusing on areas where they can really excel.
Exactly.
That makes sense, but here's the thing. The essay also says that even if they do all this, Europe could still end up importing a ton of its technology.
Oh, really?
Like we're talking 70% of its drones, 60% of its robots.
Huh. So it's like they're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Yeah, kinda. And speaking of catching up, what about defense?
Right. They've been relying on the U.S. a lot, but that's looking a bit shaky these days.
Yeah, with the possibility of the U.S. changing its foreign policy.
Europe's dependence on NATO could become a big problem.
So what's the alternative? Are we talking about a European army now?
Not quite an army, but the essay suggests a regional defense pact.
Okay.
Think about European nations pooling their resources, boosting military spending, producing more of their own defense tech.
So basically taking charge of their own security, less reliant on outside forces.
Exactly.
But wouldn't that cause some tension with the U.S., maybe even weaken NATO?
It's a bold move, and the essay knows that there could be some friction. But they argue that a stronger, more independent Europe would actually be good for both NATO and transatlantic relations in the long run.
Okay, so we've got Europe investing heavily in its cultural heritage, becoming a hub for authentic experiences, boosting innovation, and taking control of its own defense.
It's a pretty big transformation.
It is. So what does all this mean for the average European? How will their lives actually change in this new reality?
That's where things get really interesting, and that's what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
Ooh, I can't wait.
We'll delve into the social and economic side of this vision, including some pretty thought-provoking ideas about the future of work wealth and even the structure of society.
I'm intrigued. Stay tuned, folks, because we're about to go even deeper down the rabbit hole. Welcome back. So last time we were talking about this future where Europe leans into its cultural heritage like it's their superpower.
Yeah, a pretty unique idea.
It is, but even with all the best intentions, there are probably going to be some hiccups along the way.
For sure, and the FA acknowledges that this future isn't going to be all smooth sailing.
Right.
Like, remember how we were talking about Europe becoming this massive tourist destination?
Yeah.
Well, the essay also warns about all the downsides of over-tourism, and they use Venice as like the perfect example.
Oh, yeah, Venice, beautiful canals, gondolas, and tons of tourists all crammed into those tiny streets.
Exactly. It'd be kind of ironic if Europe's quest for like authenticity ends up creating these super inauthentic, overcrowded experiences.
Totally.
The essay even suggests some pretty extreme measures like that 20,000 daily visitor limit for Venice, maybe even using AI to control the flow of people.
AI as a bouncer for one of the most iconic cities in the world.
It's a pretty wild thought.
It is, but I guess when you're trying to protect something that special, you got to think outside the box.
Right, and managing the physical crowds is one thing, but the essay also brings up this idea of virtual over-tourism.
Virtual over-tourism?
Yeah, like what happens when VR gets so good that you can basically have a perfect virtual tour of the Louvre or the Colosseum without even leaving your couch?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Would that make actually going to these places less appealing?
That's the question the essay is wrestling with.
Right.
Like, would I still feel the need to travel to Paris if I could basically smell the croissants and hear the street musicians through a VR headset?
It's a good question.
It worries that if those virtual experiences get too real, the real thing might lose its value, its authenticity, you know?
Yeah, it's like the difference between watching a concert recording and actually being there live, feeling the energy of the crowd, the music vibrating through you.
Exactly. There's something about experiencing things firsthand that a simulation just can't capture.
So how does Europe find that balance? How do they use technology without letting it overshadow the human element?
Well, the essay suggests that Europe needs to be really careful about how it integrates technology.
Okay.
It's about finding that sweet spot, using tech to make things more accessible and help with preservation, but not letting it replace the real deal.
Right, like using augmented reality to make historical sites come alive?
Yeah, but still encouraging visitors to actually walk those streets and really immerse themselves.
Okay, so let's say Europe manages to avoid becoming a victim of its own success with tourism. What about the social and economic challenges that come with this whole vision?
Right, we touched on the potential for inequality and maybe even a populist backlash, especially with this idea of new landlords and new renters.
Yeah, that was a bit unsettling.
The essay doesn't shy away from the possibility that an AI-driven economy could make inequality worse.
Right.
Remember, the new landlords are the ones who own and control the AI, basically the means of production in this new world.
And the new renters are the ones who rely on universal basic income because their jobs have been automated.
Exactly. So it's like a new class system emerging with the tech elite at the top and everyone else potentially struggling to keep up.
It sounds a bit dystopian, honestly.
And the essay suggests this could lead to social unrest, especially as people feel like they're being left behind. Populist movements, which are already gaining ground in some parts of Europe, could exploit those anxieties.
Right.
They might frame immigration as a threat to jobs and cultural identity, further dividing society.
That paints a pretty bleak picture. So how does Europe avoid that kind of outcome?
Well, the essay offers some potential solutions, although they're not quick fixes.
Okay.
First, it emphasizes that universal basic income, while important, isn't enough on its own.
Right. You can't just hand people a check and expect everything to be fine.
Exactly. You need to invest in people, give them the skills to adapt and thrive in this new economy.
So, like robust education and retraining programs focusing on the jobs of the future.
Absolutely. And beyond education, the essay suggests exploring new economic models like profit-sharing schemes.
Interesting.
Imagine workers having a stake in the companies that are automating their jobs so they benefit from the increased productivity.
So, it's about making sure the wealth generated by AI is shared more fairly, not just concentrated in the hands of a few.
Exactly. And the essay also stretches the importance of social cohesion, strengthening community bonds, promoting cultural exchange, and fighting intolerance and discrimination.
It's like saying, hey, technology is just a tool. What matters is how we use it and what kind of future we create with it.
Exactly. And that's where Europe's cultural heritage comes full circle.
Okay.
It's not just about preserving old buildings and artifacts, it's about tapping into a deeper sense of human experience, a shared history and values that can help us navigate these uncharted waters.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here, but is this vision of Europe as a cultural superpower, a leader in innovation, and a model for social and economic justice, is it really realistic?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
The essay admits there are no guarantees, it's a path full of challenges, and the outcome is far from certain.
But even if they don't achieve everything in this vision, it's still a pretty inspiring thought experiment.
I agree.
It forces us to confront some really big questions about the future we want to create.
And speaking of big questions, the essay takes us even further down the rabbit hole in its final section.
Oh, now you've got me hooked. What are we talking about?
We're going to explore the FA thoughts on Europe's role in space exploration, and even wait for it, immortality research.
Whoa, space and immortality now. That's taking things to a whole new level.
Hold on tight, because we're about to dive into the deep end of the pool.
Okay, so we're back and ready to tackle the last part of this essay on Europe's future, and it's probably the most, out there part.
Yeah, definitely some thought-provoking stuff.
Last time you were teasing us with space exploration and immortality research, so let's dive right in. What's
Go on.
the essay say about Europe's cosmic ambitions?
Well, it might seem a little crazy considering how dominant the US and China are in space.
Right.
But the essay actually thinks Europe could find its own unique niche.
Okay, how so?
It's not about competing in the same way like planting flags and claiming territory.
Uh-huh.
It's more about focusing on what Europe's good at, things like sustainability and international cooperation.
So a more collaborative approach to space exploration?
Exactly. They picture Europe taking the lead on building a permanent lunar base with an international science outpost.
Whoa, a European-led lunar base.
Yeah, a place dedicated to research and exploration for the benefit of everyone.
That's a pretty ambitious goal, but I kind of like it.
Right.
I mean, Europe does have a long history of scientific discoveries, and they're really committed to sustainability.
Yeah, those are key for any kind of long-term project in space.
For sure. And think about Europe's experience with multilateralism and diplomacy.
Right, they're already pretty good at working together.
Like the European Space Agency is a great example of international collaboration.
Exactly. So building on that foundation and expanding it to a lunar base isn't totally out there.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could fit into Europe's big vision for the future, but let's be real. Space exploration is still pretty far off in terms of actually affecting our daily lives.
Yeah, true.
What about this immortality research you mentioned? Now, that's something that could really shake things up.
It definitely pushes the limits of what we think is possible.
So is the essay saying we're all going to live forever?
Well, not exactly eternal life, but it suggests that extending lifespan significantly, maybe even indefinitely, could be within reach in the next few decades.
Whoa, that's a bold statement. What makes them think that's even remotely possible?
They point to all the crazy progress we're seeing in genetics, bioengineering, nanotechnology.
Right.
They believe these fields are all coming together in ways that could lead to breakthroughs in slowing down or even reversing aging.
So like repairing cellular damage at the molecular level or reprogramming our genes to resist age-related decline.
Exactly. It sounds like science fiction, but it might not be as far off as we think.
It does kind of sound like a sci-fi movie, but even if it's scientifically possible, wouldn't extending human lifespans create a whole bunch of new problems?
Oh, absolutely.
Like what about overpopulation resource scarcity, the strain on social systems?
You're hitting the nail on the head. The essay knows that the implications of radical life extension are huge and complicated.
Right. It wouldn't be a simple fix.
We'd have to rethink everything: economic systems, healthcare, retirement planning, the whole concept of mortality.
It'd be like hitting the reset button on civilization.
In a way, yeah, but I think that's the essay's point. It's not about predicting the future perfectly. It's about getting us to think about these big questions now so we're prepared for whatever comes next.
So we need to start figuring out how to navigate these uncharted territories.
Exactly. And the essay thinks that Europe, with its emphasis on humanism and ethics, could be in a good position to lead these tough conversations.
That makes sense. It's about considering the long-term consequences of our actions, not just blindly chasing technological advancement. Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive, from Europe's potential as a cultural superpower to space exploration, and even the possibility of radical life extension. It's been quite a ride. What's the main takeaway for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the future is not set in stone. We have the power to shape it with our hopes, our dreams, and our actions. This essay gives us a really interesting vision of what Europe's future could be. But it's up to all of us, no matter where we are, to engage with these ideas, challenge assumptions, and help create the future we want to see.
Yeah, beautifully said. So to everyone listening out there, don't just sit back and watch, get involved, ask questions, and be part of building a future that's both innovative and humane, a future that embraces technology but also the power of human connection.
And who knows, maybe Europe's journey with all its twists and turns can inspire others to follow a similar path.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of Europe's potential future. We hope it's sparked your imagination and given you some food for thought.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.